Welcome to the Wild Ag Podcast, where we'll serve as a connection point for landowners and conservation professionals who want to integrate conservation and agriculture. I'm Dr. Andrew Little, Professor of Landscape Ecology and Habitat Management and Extension Specialist at the University of Nebraska.
And I'm Nate Pfluger, Precision Ag Coordinator for Pheasants Forever and an avid outdoorsman with friends and family in my free time. Together, we'll work to bring you perspectives from both landowners and conservation professionals for discussions on soil, water, and wildlife in ag-dominated landscapes. Welcome back to the Wild Ag Podcast. Today, I'm here with my co-host, Dr. Andy Little, and today we're joined by Jake Koenig. Jake Koenig?
Koenig.
Yep. You know, I've known you for a handful of years and still couldn't get it right.
It's a hard one.
But I had the opportunity to meet Jake and work with Jake, starting with PF back in 2019. And then since then, he actually made the jump over to the Monarch Joint Venture. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about today is the Monarch and just the Monarch Joint Venture. And so we'll throw it over to Jake to introduce himself.
Cool. Thanks, Nate. Yeah, as you mentioned, we had the fortune to, work together for a number of years there, but, and we still kind of do a little bit, right? We still collaborate on some cool ideas. I'm still working in Nebraska, but, yeah, as Nate mentioned, my name's Jake Koenig. I'm Monarch Joint Venture's Midwest Habitat Program Manager, stationed here remotely in Wahoo, Nebraska.
Oh, yeah.
But cover pretty much, the main central flyway. East of the Rocky Mountains is kind of my priority zone with, a subset of like 12 of those states that we want to work in based on some past research of where that work is most important. But, we try not to say no to a lot of projects because they're all important.
Sure.
So the Monarch Joint Venture, that's a nonprofit, correct?
Yeah,
it is. And then kind of when and why did that actually start?
Yeah, so we're a nonprofit 501c3. We're actually not that old in the grand scheme of things. We just became a nonprofit in 2018.
Okay.
So before that, we were the Monarch Lab at the University of Minnesota.
Oh.
And that kind of started with Dr. Karen Oberhauser, pretty important name there in the Monarch world, of course. But that was about, I want to say 2008 when they kind of started that. And then as things evolved, it just kind of made sense to branch off and become a nonprofit. So, I started, 4 years ago now, like 2022.
Time flies.
Yeah, I know. It really does. But yeah, at that time, it felt like we had still a pretty small team. A lot of those folks from the lab had actually transferred over into the joint venture as a nonprofit, which was great. A lot of great folks there. They're still with us. But we had a pretty small team, and we've grown substantially, almost 3 times that now since I've started.
So that's really interesting. So it started out as basically initially as a research lab, and then kind of expanded or blossomed into this. That's pretty awesome.
Yep.
To see how that's happened. That's really cool. So how many total people then work with an organization?
Right now you would ask me that. I can't keep tabs
even an estimate would be fine.
Yeah. And I mean, we work nationwide, right?
Yeah,
so
sure.
I mean, there's a lot of staff. We're working remotely. Our headquarters is based in St. Paul, Minnesota.
Oh, sure.
But like I said, we've got folks in like 10 different states, I want to say.
Oh, wow.
We do not only Eastern population for Monarchs, but also the Western population in California.
Sure.
But I want to say roughly 30 staff probably.
Wow.
Now,
that's pretty impressive.
And I don't know the exact numbers of which
Sure.
ones of those are full-time versus the seasonals we do hire for
Sure.
monitoring and things like that. But a lot of that's getting kicked off, so we've got a lot of new folks on board getting ready for the field season coming up here.
That's really cool. So I'm curious, so like from the funding side of things or for employment, do they get mainly grants that are helping to support?
Yep.
Or is it that and donations and things along those lines? I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah, that's a good question. So, I mean, we're always chasing grants.
Sure.
That's kind of the beast of being a nonprofit.
Sure.
You just got to, to sustain, and things have been a little wonky in the last couple of years with these funding sources, but a lot of grants, but, we do get some private donations and things
Sure.
like that too for the work that we do. And then we let, leadership kind of decide where those funds are best spent or where we're, lacking and need them to support our mission.
That's really cool. That's awesome.
So you mentioned the Monarch Joint Venture really kind of grew out of a research lab. Was there a specific project or a series of research projects that kicked off the need or identified the need for an organization to go out and work specifically for the Monarch?
Right. That's a good question. I mean, and I wasn't there for that transition, so I don't know the exact background story about that, but I'm sure I could run it down. Like I said, a lot of our executive director, Wendy Caldwell, she's been there since the lab, so she could probably run that down. But, there's a lot of organizations I feel like out there that are focused on, pollinator things. Some of them are Monarch specific, which this really is. And I mean, we can get into that more here in a minute. But I think there was kind of a nationwide need for consistent messaging for Monarch butterfly conservation. And then that's, really what we wanted to provide.
So do you know what your mission statement is today, or how do you accomplish what your goals and objectives are?
Yeah, not verbatim, but I can try.
I don't know PF, so I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
I can pull it up. It's on our main landing page there. But yeah, I mean, the Monarch Joint Venture's mission is to conserve the monarch butterfly and its migration, right, through basically our main 4 pillars, right? So we've got habitat, which I'm biased because obviously I'm a lead in that staff, but one of the most important things. But the other important things that are pivotal are the science, education, and partnership. So
that's awesome.
Without any one of those, 4 legs in that chair, we don't stand well. So that's pretty much kind of how we accomplish our mission at the moment.
Yep. Yeah. Well, that's a really good point, because that's kind of illustration of, even just within my own lab, here at the university with extension and research, how critical all that is. And then building those partnerships out so that, one, you can continue to grow a lot of these initiatives. Because as even with being a PF before and now in your current role, we're all working in a similar realm. We may all have, different missions, and that's totally fine, but we're trying to get more habitat out in the landscape. And how do we do that strategically? And one of the things that's actually was cool from a survey we did here about 3 years ago in Nebraska, over 7,500 farmers and farmland owners in Nebraska. And in that, we found that producers were more likely to adopt conservation programs as they basically heard similar messaging from a lot of different conservation organizations, which makes sense, and think about that in the marketing realm for just private, products, whatever you're buying. But the point is that if they're hearing similar messaging around these topics, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, hey, here's a person or an organization I can go to for support. And oh, by the way, they also are collaborating with this other organization as a similar, vision of getting more habitat in these working lands. So that's awesome.
Absolutely.
So what makes the monarch butterfly so special in that it gets its own organization?
Yeah, that's a good point, right? I mean, it's really no different than a lot of the other organizations, Pheasants Forever, Quail Forever, right? I mean, it's a flagship species, so it's easily identifiable. A lot of people are familiar or have had a personal firsthand experience with the monarch butterfly. But it sets us up really good for, that conversation of biodiversity as a whole. That's what that flagship species is trying to deliver. So, our mission is the monarch butterfly, its migration, but it's still all those other things that come along with the work that we're doing. Efficiently. We're trying not to do random acts of conservation, right? We're trying to use that science to back up what we know and implement that. But at the same time, that's where it's nice with the monarch butterfly is, it's pretty much everywhere, and at least in the United States. So somebody's had those firsthand experiences. Oh yeah. And they could make an impact in their backyard. Right.
Yeah. And I mean, that was a good point that you brought up. It's not just about the monarch, right? Like, it's on the posters, it's in the name of the organization, and just like Pheasants and Quail Forever. But when you're doing habitat in the name of that species, you're helping a slew of other native species that are just as important and just as significant.
For sure.
Yeah, and we've done that. So we have a project that is a part of our bigger pheasant project that we actually took data from our acoustic monitors, and we were actually looking at up in northeast Nebraska, as you're targeting habitat for pheasants, what's the potential spillover for, non-game birds, for example, and how could you potentially, think about the system as a whole? And it's not just non-game birds, it's pollinators, and it's all the kind of collective benefit benefits that you could have beyond just, hey, I'm just focusing on pheasants, because I think that's really key, and good point, Nate, that ultimately, you're benefiting a lot of different things in the landscape, not just, a species as a whole. So
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, it's tough, right? Managing for one species over another. There's always
Sure.
net losses with
Oh,
net
yeah.
gains and timing. But yeah, I mean, that conversation can be had. And that's where, not only the science and the habitat and educating folks is important, but that partnership, to work with our partners and not, count anybody out at any time. So we can try to say yes and move that needle.
Yeah, that's good.
So digging into the monarch a little more specifically here, can we touch on just the life cycle of that species and how that all comes together, and maybe when and how we should be managing for the species?
Yep. So that's a good one. And I wasn't sure if I should bring visuals, but I did. So we have like this pretty cool, like little flip card chart. It gives you information about the life cycle exactly, from egg to adult to their migration, disease that they encounter, all those different things. But yeah, I mean, I guess to start, square one, they're an egg, right? They start out as an egg, then they develop into a caterpillar. They go through 5 different instars, so 5 different stages of that caterpillar.
Wow. Is that common for most butterfly species or no?
Not necessarily. But yeah, this one, it's kind of unique in that way. But you can see they exponentially grow in size to that tiny little thing you can barely see, to like a monstrous 5th instar caterpillar. And then that usually takes 10 to 14 days roughly in that larval instar stage, and then they're gonna pupate, and form a chrysalis. If I can find that picture of that. But
and we'll have to get some links for online. We can show folks at these different stages, because I think it's important to see that, because a lot of times you just don't really, you see them at one stage a lot of times. So it's cool to actually see that process.
So yeah, butterflies, they obviously form a chrysalis compared to a moth that forms a cocoon. So a little bit different, but it's a common misconception.
Well, I would have said cocoon. So
that's what I would have.
Yep. And then like you said, those different life stages, you think like, oh man, if there's a monarch caterpillar on this milkweed, I'm going to see it. It's not the case. Like, you got to pay attention. Finding those eggs can be hard. Once you do it, it's kind of addicting. You keep looking at under every leaf and, parts of the milkweed plant trying to find them. But you find that, and then that first instar is small and doesn't necessarily look like your traditional monarch, right? It's kind of black and translucent almost. So yeah, that's kind of their main life stages. And then once, they're an adult, they're flying around, they're nectaring, they're breeding. And so as far as kind of like figuring out timelines of when we should be doing those things, a lot of it is dependent upon your location, right?
Sure.
So for us in the Midwest, if we had to pick like best management practices or something like that, if you were going to do cover removal, ideally you'd be doing them when they're not here.
Sure.
And so that's tough, right? Because management must go on.
Oh yeah.
And for us, it'd be roughly, we have a handout on this too for like mowing management best practices, roughly that, end of September to April, I'll say, is middle of April, would be when we recommend doing those types of cover removal, because they're not here.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Whether in a larval end stage or as an adult.
And the monarch's unique in the fact that it's not going to be in that dead material, right, that you're mowing. So it's not like you're going to be destroying part of that population like some other species potentially.
Exactly. Yep, like those that are overwintering here. Exactly. Yeah. And so, that's kind of nice, because you have that pretty obvious threshold of like, if your only objective is monarchs, which often it's not. For a lot of the landowners that we work with, or even agencies. We know, like I said, that management must go on, and a lot of times it's going to happen during that growing season. So it's really just trying to accommodate, what you're doing to mitigate the risks as much as possible.
Sure.
And so whether that's fire, or mowing or haying or whatever, maybe we're reducing the size recommendation of how much you're doing and staggering it, so there's still something there. There's a lot of different dynamics to try to account for.
Yeah, well, that's conservation.
Yeah, in a nutshell, yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
like
it's just always complex. That's why we always say it, and the answer is it depends.
That's exactly. I was going to say the exact same things, and people always ask me a really direct question.
Yeah.
I'm like, I feel like I'm not being direct enough in answering this, but
it's being true. Like, it's not like we're trying to hide anything. It's just it's being totally honest. It really depends. There's so many things that are very landscape context specific, and then you get into the little details of different landowner objectives and kind of what they need, and then the species. And if you're not, like you said, most people are not managing just for monarchs, and so they're managing for other species. Similar to pheasants, they're not always managed just for pheasants. And so they're managing for multiple species, and all those things need different resources throughout the year. So it does truly come down to it. Depends. So
exactly. Yeah. And I mean, doing those different, management things specifically for the monarch it's going to be beneficial, especially outside of those time frames most of the time. Whether it's encouraging, more regrowth of milkweed, even if it's during the growing season, maybe it's the middle. And you're like, well, you just cut down all those big milkweed plants, right? Well, they're still going to regrow yet that growing season if it's early enough, which a lot of times, those adult monarchs that are here during the breeding season, they're looking for that supple regrowth. I mean, it's like a magnet. You can't, if you go and look at a mowed ditch, at that time frame in the middle of summer and they're here, it's almost guaranteed you're going to find eggs on that regrowth.
From what was previously mowed.
If it was a big, woody plant that just kind of got old where you may not have expected to see some of those instars or eggs. Not that they wouldn't use it, but they really do. I mean, it makes a difference.
So are monarchs specifically laying their eggs on the milkweed plant, or are there other plants that they're going to lay eggs on?
That's the only thing they'll lay their eggs on is milkweed species.
Is it some symbiotic relationship, or what? I mean, what is that?
So, I mean, that's their host plant. Yeah. It's, and it's weird too, right? Because people immediately think they're like, well, it's just milkweed. So the first thing that comes to their mind is common milkweed, which, as its name suggests, is pretty common and widespread throughout the U.S. However, like in Nebraska alone, I think we have like 16 or 17 native milkweed species.
Wow.
In the country, there's like 73 plus native milkweed species. So it's pretty cool. And they can technically use all of them as a host plant. There's some other ones that are not Asclepias species that they can use as a host plant, so that's a little confusing. But it still has, like, for example, I'll say honeyvine milkweed. It's not a true Asclepias species. However, it is still a host plant for them, but still in the common name at least.
So where are they laying their eggs on these species? If somebody was going to go out and try to find a monarch egg, what's it look like? Where's it at?
Yeah, for sure. So it's going to be typically on the underside of the leaf. Like I said, usually on the more supple leaves. They don't really love to start on those woody plants, but like them big old thick leaves you see late in the summer on those big milkweed plants. They will use them, but they don't prefer it. And the females are usually pretty good about. Every one of them's different, honestly, but it's kind of, this is what it looks like. So an egg. So it's just, and it can kind of be confused with kind of like a sap droplet too, right? Because most milkweeds emit some sort of sap. Not all species do. Like butterfly milkweed's one of those that does not have sap. But, so it can be confused. Like you'll see little dots of that latex on there. But these will be almost kind of like a football shape with, one of the tips cut off and then have some kind of white striations on it. And it's kind of more cream colored too, not like pure white.
Sure.
So usually it's on the underside of the leaf, not always. If it's an older plant, they'll be on typically towards the top just because there's the smaller regrowth. The new leaves are up there. On hairy species of milkweed, really villous type plants, I've found them closer to like the flowers or the pods, and they'll start like eating those first. So, I mean, it widely varies where you'll find the eggs. So you be careful, because when you grab that leaf, you might just crush one and you don't know. But, they're pretty stable too. So, once you start identifying them though, you'd be pretty amazed how many you can start to find in a good year.
About how many eggs are usually, will a female lay?
Yeah. So, it varies. Per plant or just
both questions per plant, and then just throughout its life cycle.
It's a lot. I'm trying to remember what the threshold is like per female of eggs. It varies a little bit. I'll follow up with that number because I don't want to get it wrong here. But and it does vary per plant too, right? It might be just one egg.
Oh, sure.
Sometimes females will egg dump. They'll find they may not be a lot of resources available on the landscape. So they just, which is unfortunate if they do, because if they all survive, they can eat themselves out of basically direct competition, right?
Oh, yeah.
For eating that entire milkweed resource
Sure.
before they're fully developed.
Yeah. That's interesting. Well, and that's actually, and we'll dive into this in a little bit, but like seeing the changes through time with ag landscapes and kind of losing, milkweed, obviously, yeah, I'm sure that's kind of that, there's a carrying capacity just like there is for any other species. And so
yeah.
It's like you eventually overshoot that, have too many eggs, and it's like, oh, we don't have enough milkweed out here.
Yeah. And I mean, it's very dependent on the weather too, right? And so, they've been already moving through Texas pretty good at this point in the year, usually about March, right? That's when they really start leaving the overwintering sites down there. And so if we're in a drought or whatever, they haven't gotten rain and there's just not much for milkweed regrowth where they recolonize that first, the overwintering generation will lay the first generation in the southern tiers, right? That can be pretty pivotal for what that breeding season's going to look like. They can bounce back pretty good if we have good conditions up here. But if
Sure.
we're all slated in some sort of extreme weather event or another,
Oh, yeah.
it can be pretty impactful. Because it's not only the milkweeds, too. It's also the floral resources, right? They need the nectar.
Sure.
So it's kind of double-edged sword there.
Yeah, definitely. So when you're working within a dominated ag landscape, which, I mean, arguably most of the Midwest is,
For
right?
sure.
What are the threats to their population? And you kind of touched a little bit on them, but what are their threats and kind of what are the barriers that we need to overcome?
Yeah, so I mean, it's kind of it's death by 1,000 cuts, right? And I mean, it's no different than a lot of the other species we're
sure.
seeing in decline. Yeah. But yeah, there's a ton of them out there. It's definitely habitat loss, right? And it's not, there's not just one demographic that's guilty of doing this,
Sure.
right? So I
Yeah.
mean, yes, it's some current ag practices for sure. There's herbicides, chemicals for sure play a part in this. Urban expansion, another big part of this, huge part of this. So again, the weather is another threat, just kind of those more volatile, extreme weather events, more drought. So it's variable. Again, kind of depends, like we said before.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a really good point, just going back to like, it is for a lot of these species a death by 1,000 cuts. And it's like I think as humans, we, really would love to put, a super easy, like, here, it's this. And it's like, well, actually, no, it's like this plus a bunch of other stuff.
Yep.
And I just thinking about, like, you mentioned urbanization, just driving up here this morning, they're putting in another gas station off 84th Street.
Yeah.
They took, and that was, for the past, 7 years I've lived here. Most of that was just all corn, soybean fields, and that's all getting converted over now. They're putting buildings in there. And so, that urbanization is another big factor that sometimes always isn't considered in that calculation. So,
and that presents with it an opportunity, right?
Oh, sure.
I mean, for us to change some practices, even in the urban communities, that interface with, even as it gets drier, water resources, right? There's days where we're going to be limited, and that's already happens all over the country.
Oh, yeah.
But maybe we should be, more appropriately picking plants that are adapted to that type of environment, especially these native species that require little babying or effort to grow, and you're making a difference.
Yeah, no, that's good, and that's a really I like you hit on that, because a lot of times I find that we're really good at identifying the problem and not so much on identifying solutions to that. And so the innovative, nature of that, like saying like, hey, we're facing urbanization. That's not going to stop.
Nope.
So how do we find solutions within that to be able to solve some of these problems? And when I say solving it, it's not going to be like an easy solve. Like it's not going to, and so, but we're constantly adapting to that changing landscape and creating new ideas and new ventures that can essentially address some of these problems we're facing, to say, basically we do nothing, or we take and adapt and we figure out solutions to help, mitigate some of those challenges we're facing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, with all the changes, we really can't continue business as usual and just, expect it to be all right. We do have to make a pretty valid effort, but that's where we do have to get creative in this landscape.
Yeah.
Working within a dominated ag landscape, obviously growers want to keep their fields clean, right? So they really don't want any competition from any weedy species or a species that's seen as a weed.
For sure.
In your opinion, or is there any research around having weed in the milkweed name? Does that just right away put a bad thought in a grower's head that really doesn't necessarily need to be there?
I mean, I think so, probably, right? It's unfortunate that that's its common name. It happens with a lot of other species too that are not as prominent maybe, but yeah, for the monarch, the milkweed being the host plant for the monarch butterfly, and all of the history, right, of controlling milkweed within field boundaries, right? It's like cultural by generation too. So there's been a shift, right? I mean, I've heard growers say it to me, like I can remember, Rogan fields and cutting every milkweed stem we see, and now I'm planting them.
Yeah. No.
Right. And it's it's good that they recognize and they've been able to adapt and change. I mean, there's always people out there living under rocks or just not open to the idea. But yeah, with today's modern practices, at least in field, it's really not a concern to control that weedy species directly.
Yeah, I would agree. And it's the milkweed species, they're not going to be invasive and take over a whole field. They're not that prolific.
No, I mean, there's certain species, common milkweed is rhizomatous, right? So yeah, it does spread by rhizome, but it's pretty weak in the grand scheme with, like I said, common farming practices. So
Sure. Well, and also I think it's important to think about that diversity we have out there. I think that's one of the things when we go back and look at historically, and you kind of reference this, 50s and 60s, people always say, well, hey, I had a lot of pheasants out in the landscape. I remember as a kid, or I remember my, parents out there hunting, and so they look at that landscape back then compared to today and how dramatically different they are.
Oh, yeah.
And with the, simply just from a crop diversification standpoint, that's when we had back in the 60s kind of our high, basically peak of diversification.
Yep.
And then obviously we've seen that steady decline over time. But again, it's like, how do we kind of get back to some diversification there in the landscape? And I think this is an opportunity where you can definitely do that and, provide some of that. It's kind of funny. Yeah, it's funny to hear the producer's perspectives, like removing it. And now they're actually putting it back in.
Yeah,
there.
A little backtracking
and so,
action. But.
Yeah, but again, and I think like this podcast is a good illustration of it. Education is so critical that we get this information out to people, because I think as we continue, there's so much information out there and kind of the ways that things have been done maybe for decades, we can say, hey, maybe we need to adapt a little bit and think of some new innovative approaches. And, you're alluding to that today with some of the conversations with the venture. So I'm excited to see where it continues on into the future. So and
just to be clear, it's okay to backtrack.
Just it is. Oh, absolutely.
Something wrong at one point. I mean, that doesn't mean you can't make a change and head down a new path. I mean, it's important for growers and resource professionals even, I mean, to say that, right? You know what? We were wrong at this point in time. And let's just make a change and move forward on a better path.
Well, and I also think the other thing I think it's important people to think about is as they're building it out, doesn't mean we're asking to take and convert complete fields over. Maybe some people want to do that, and that's awesome. But, it's just it can be small pieces of that. And I can totally see that from, putting more milkweed out in the landscape. It doesn't have to be like we're taking out big sections of a field and convert back over, just little places here and there. And then eventually you kind of have this almost like you're putting together a puzzle, and you have all these little patches that essentially would connect up to be one large patch if you added them all together. So
yeah, that's a good point to make too. Like you said, it's the ag landscape working in that mosaic with the urban landscape and all the others providing, maybe it's stretched out a little bit, but basically a corridor, right, of habitat. It's not all intact necessarily, but as far as the way the monarch travels, it's usable.
And yeah, Andy brought up patch size, right? So what patch size, what size of habitat do we need for the monarch butterfly?
Yeah.
And obviously the monarch's unique from a lot of species, maybe not necessarily the butterfly species or insect species, but they're able to fly, right? They can probably move greater distances than some of our other wildlife can, right? But what patch size are you looking at putting on the ground?
I mean, that's where I said, is nice too, right? It's kind of empowering because everybody can make a difference. There's small projects, might be someone with, plants in a pot on a balcony. They might use it. I mean, it can be beneficial. that's where we're really just looking to be able to say yes to those projects, where they're, in priority areas for sure. Size is not usually a limiting factor. It is, the way that we run some of the programs, unfortunately, for eligibility and things like that. But as far as our standpoint, would we love them to be bigger in size? Yes.
Sure.
The small ones take just as much time to plan as the big ones. But, at the same time, we're totally willing to consider how to make that happen and create that mosaic approach. It might be a quarter acre here, and then you got a 60-acre field, a mile away or whatever, and then another 20 habitats that are garden size or whatever, 100 square feet, 500 square feet in between.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's important too that, it goes back to that conversation of, if you build those, patches and start thinking of from a landscape level approach, that's what I like to look at, because that's part of my position.
Yeah.
The bigger picture, and you're kind of thinking, like you said, that urban, you kind of rural mosaics and creating kind of that habitat heterogeneity the best we can, knowing we're not going to be able to get massive patches. Because I think sometimes that's the assumption is, I'm going to have to take and convert all of this. And it's like, no, and I'm happy if we do get people and we do need, larger blocks.
Oh, yeah.
But at the same time, if you're like, hey, I just can't do that, I could just do something small. Hey, you know what? That's better than having nothing out there. Just those little incremental changes are really powerful. And then you begin to look at that, kind of zoom out and look at the connectivity of all of that collectively and the power that can have in the landscape. I think the more we can kind of think about these landscapes in that holistic perspective moving forward, I think that's really where the innovation is going to come and how we make that functionally work for species like monarchs and others. So.
And I completely agree. I mean, that's the tough part, right? Is when I mentioned random acts of conservation, but it's like, well, with the monarch butterfly, it might seem random, but you might not know about that habitat that's over the hill just because it's not on one of our maps or whatever that we're tracking. So, again, we want to be able to say yes to wherever it makes sense, and it's not an all or nothing approach, as you mentioned.
And that's a great point, because obviously with some species we need to be strategic, right? We need to focus on that core, but maybe with the species like the monarch, you can't, or you shouldn't, right? Because they're going to be heading south or north, other places too.
It varies year to year. Like I said, the weather can dictate a lot of that. They might be good all the way through the south, and then they get to our area, the Midwest, and it's dry, right? That's happened. And, you can sometimes see where during the breeding season the majority of that population chooses to inhabit. They kind of follow the water, right? A lot of times. That's kind of an anecdotal observation, but that last time that happened, when the timing worked out, we saw a lot of them push to the west, go up into the Front Range. We were getting a lot of reports over that way, and it kind of made almost a horseshoe shape around us. Whereas, I was getting endless reports, people throughout the Midwest that were just like, we're not seeing hardly anything. This was a couple years ago, but so they move, right? And you got to have, just because they're not using a lot right now doesn't mean they might not need it at a different year. And so there's that ebb and flow. If you build it, they will come. A lot of people say that, but it might not come right away, but there might be value in a tard year.
Yeah, so that's really good.
What is the current status of the monarch species?
Yeah, so that's a little wonky too, right? With everything, it's kind of like the funding conversation. But they were proposed to be listed as threatened with 4D rule is what was supposed to happen. Oh man, like I said, time flies. It feels like we've been talking about this for a while, like a year and a half, 2 years longer. Current administration changes things of that nature. Fish and Wildlife was supposed to make a decision, I believe, back in December. That kind of got punted. So right now I think they're just slated for long-term action. Whatever that means exactly. We have, some blog posts and things that dive deep into it, but I won't bore you guys today with it. But yeah, I mean, the need is still definitely there. It was right there. They had the documentation, research support they needed to list it as threatened with 4D, but it really doesn't change the fact that the work needs to continue on the landscape.
Yeah.
So without a doubt, I mean, the monarch population has declined severely over 20, 30 years?
Yeah, it definitely has. Like the trend, I mean, you can see it on the chart, right, for at least both the eastern overwintering colonies and the western population. I think the western population in California this year, they do overwinter counts over there, and they were just like above 12,000 individual butterflies.
Wow.
Is what they're at, right?
I mean, that's one weather event away from that population not being there.
Wow.
It's scary, right? It's pretty low. And then, this year we had pretty good news, at least in the East, which I think, again, through anecdotal observations through the breeding season, just the kind of way it's set up last year, we were fortunate with the rain that we did get through the growing season, at least last year. And, the most recent reports, they just came out with this like a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, they released these numbers, but sitting at like 2.93 hectares it's an increase from last year, which we were at that 1.79 hectare mark, and the year before we were at 0.9 hectares. So it looks good on the graph, but if you look at kind of our chart too, you'll see a line in there. And that line is at 6 hectares, which is what we've designated to be what we need to have a sustainable population moving forward.
Okay.
So we're well short of that still, even with the optimistic news. We still have a lot of work to be done. But yeah, that's kind of where we're sitting right now.
And we'll throw this graph online when the podcast comes out so folks can look at it and kind of know what we're talking about. But when I first look at this, you see large fluctuations from year to year, even back when the populations were steady, right? Or not as of concern. So these large fluctuations, we know they happen from year to year.
Yep.
And can we attribute that to weather? Is that probably what we should attribute those to?
That's a good point. I would say, I mean, I know it definitely plays a factor. I don't know that it's, again, just like the threats, I don't think that we can specifically key on that. I mean, it probably was the perfect conditions, perfect scenario for those, that population to boom. But, it's pretty consistent with insect populations and how they act. They can be pretty variable year to year. It's just, you're going to see a lot less of that variability the smaller and smaller that number gets.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, you can notice a definite decline from the 90s.
Trend there for sure.
And so this is the total forest area occupied? Yeah. So when you were saying 6, that's referencing that. Okay.
Yeah. So the area that the butterflies will occupy within those overwintering colonies is measured. And then it's an estimate of density per hectare, essentially. So I think it's like 20 million butterflies per hectare is roughly the estimate there. It does vary based on the density of each tree in each colony.
Oh yeah.
But
that's really cool.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to get too far ahead here, but so did you get the opportunity to go down and visit?
I did.
Okay. So I'm kind of curious now that we're on this topic of that area,
yeah.
What was that like?
Oh,
and kind of telling people more about that process.
Yeah. I mean, bucket list trip, right?
Okay.
We met up and chatted a little bit about this when we were at the state habitat meeting stuff, just very briefly, but I had kind of just gotten back at that time, but wow. I mean, yeah, it totally lived up to expectations and beyond.
That's cool.
I mean, when you get there to the overwintering sites, we started that first day at El Rosario.
Okay.
So
this is in Mexico.
Yep. Yeah, down by Michoacan, Mexico is where that is. So we started at El Rosario, and it's one of the bigger colonies where a lot of the butterflies will overwinter, actually. And just, it's breathtaking when you get there, right?
That's cool.
It's hard to put into words, to be honest.
So are these wintering grounds, are they outside of a town? Are they in the mountains? Where, paint us a picture of it.
Yep. So they're outside of town. They're in the mountains of Mexico down there. And so they have these biosphere reserves. They're at roughly usually anywhere from 9,000 to 11,000 feet. Is kind of where we're at. And they're specifically overwintering on the Oyamel fir trees. So Aves religiosa is the scientific name. But they pretty much cover these trees. I mean,
really?
we can share some pictures, but most of the time they're on the branches, so much so it looks like leaves of a tree. But again, these are fir trees, they're conifers with needles. It's all butterflies.
Oh
and
my
they're just
gosh.
weighing these branches down like
Wow.
insane. Right?
And you know how much a single butterfly weighs. So
Yeah.
that would be crazy to
Yeah.
see a
That would-
tree folding under the pressure of just butterfly weight.
That's
It's
crazy.
insane. And then when they, when it warms up and they become active and they're all flying around and I mean there was nectar resources available. There was actually a lot more blooming plants there than I anticipated. I went in early February there. And so they have them available. Most of the time though, they have enough of lipid storage to, basically go into diapause over the winter while they're overwintering.
Okay.
But if they need it, and they're burning a little excess energy or whatever, and they need it, that there is nectar resources down there. Otherwise, you might just catch them kind of puddling in the water and stuff that's in the streams in the mountains. And it's just,
That's really cool.
it's fascinating to watch. And it's nice, like from a tourist standpoint, nice when we have the nice warm days because they're pretty active.
Sure, yeah.
But it's not necessarily good for the butterfly either because, you kind of want them to remain relatively inactive so they're not burning a lot of that energy. And so even some of that, warming period, degree day difference, some of that encourages their decision of when they decide to migrate, right? So when they decide to leave the overwintering grounds, if they leave too early, there's nothing there for them when they get to where they need to be. And, that can be its own shortfall.
Yeah. I mean, and that's so with the last couple of years, it seems like we've had huge fluctuations in temperature. I mean, heck, we've had 80, 90 degree days here in March.
Yeah.
And then we could be staring down the barrel of freezing temperatures again. So I imagine if a monarch starts migrating north too early, it'd be pretty quick that it would succumb to poor weather conditions.
Well, especially, in those swings, right? I mean, they can handle some pretty colder temperatures than you'd think, but, you get below freezing, like that's a pretty big problem for them, especially for more than one day. So, those fluctuations can be pretty disastrous for a pretty significant portion of those populations.
That's crazy. Well, and like you said, this winter's been like up and down, and it's been amazing. Like having 1 week where it's like we're gonna get a couple inches of snow, and then like later in the week it's 90 degrees.
I know.
So
last
crazy.
week, whenever that was, it was like 98 or whatever, and 5-6 days before was like negative wind chill temperatures. It's like, what the heck is going on?
Roller coaster. So you mentioned a reserve or a preserve. So it seems like the locals, I mean, they're trying to protect their wintering range. Is that correct? And they're probably excited about having that population there for ecotourism and things of that nature?
For sure. Yeah, I mean, it's not only a pretty big cultural part of their history down there, right, for the butterfly.
Oh, sure.
But I mean, they're fully supportive of these ejidos and these groups down there that are basically managing these biosphere reserves, of protecting them from illegal logging, a variety of other things. But like I said, they're pretty remote up here in the mountains. Like it takes a little bit of a jaunt to get to them. We took a small truck all the way up the mountain, then we parked, and then we took horses up further.
Oh my goodness.
And then we walked from there because we didn't want, too much horse disturbance that close. So I mean, like it's a jaunt to get to these places, and the local people are the ones that are really keeping a pulse on what's happening there and protecting them, to be honest.
That's cool.
So will the monarch come back and overwinter? Obviously, it's not the same individual, but do they utilize the same wintering grounds, or can they move around the mountain or a preserve?
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, they do move around. I guess if they wanted to, they could go to a different colony if the weather was conducive. I don't know if we've shown that anyway, but that's where, some of the latest research too, that we've been using these blue morpho tags, these CTT tags.
Oh, yeah.
They're Bluetooth transmitters. I mean, it shows us exactly where they're going, as long as we can transmit, right, to like a Modus tower.
Oh, sure.
That's the challenge in those areas is getting it. But a lot of these reports, these pings will ping right off of Bluetooth. Your phone doesn't matter, even if you don't have the app, as long as you have Bluetooth connected. So then you're within range without a barrier. But it's showing us a ton. I mean, this last year, I think they've been doing it for about 2 years. They've been releasing some of these tags, but last year was a huge effort. We did a bunch of them here in Nebraska, actually. We're going to do a bunch more this fall.
Oh, okay.
They run, they're like the Blue Morpho Plus tags or whatever per tag. They're tiny, like 0.06 grams or something is what they weigh. And we'll call it a backpack transmitter, but we're basically putting adhesive on the abdomen, the back of the butterfly, and putting that transmitter on them.
Sure.
They run like $200 a piece. With it's like $2 a month for the plan or whatever, to keep it live. But that's going to show us those movements. If an individual butterfly is going to move to a different colony, and exactly what travel route they're taking to get back into the U.S. They tagged some for the first time at the overwintering sites. So they're getting a ton of data on that. Monarch Watch, one of our partners out of Kansas there, is reporting a bunch of that information. But yeah, I mean, mostly it's really useful data because we want to tag them at different times of the year. It's expensive, but it's giving us extremely useful information that we have not had access to before. And we're learning different things, how far they can fly in a day, how fast they get there, the routes they're going, and if there's a congregation of some of the ones we tagged, why are they there? So it's not only the overwintering ones, but we tagged the ones, migrating in the fall.
Yeah, having that sort of information, I mean, it's going to allow you to answer questions you didn't even know you had
Oh,
down
yeah,
the road.
yeah.
Like, why are they
true.
here? What are they honing in on? That's pretty amazing. So you mentioned this last year was the first year they tagged monarchs on the overwintering grounds. Did they?
I believe it was.
Okay. Do they usually not like to mess with them or do any sort of research in their wintering grounds, right?
I mean, they do to an extent, but they're definitely it depends on the ask, right? And then obviously getting the approval from, the Mexican government or those locals there to do that kind of work. Because they are very protective, right? Like when you're going up, like the trails are roped off. You don't just get free range of running the forest.
Oh, okay.
You're a certain distance from the large groups of these butterflies roosting. And so, yeah, I mean, they're pretty protective, but they have been very open to the research too, because, they ultimately want the best for the butterfly too.
So can you walk through like that, because for a lot of people like that migration, kind of how that works.
Yep.
And so like you talked about the life cycle a little bit, but because I'm kind of curious too, like are some of these, eventually like when they return to those colonies, and then is it kind of eventually like almost like if you want to say like a spatial memory where they kind of eventually learn some of this over time? It's pretty amazing to me that they can do that.
Right. That's part of the fascinating thing of the monarch too, right? Because it's 4 distinct generations.
Yeah.
Right? It's totally separate, never the same individual.
Sure.
4 generations from overwintering north back to overwintering?
Yeah. So yes, exactly. So we'll start, just because given the time of year, we'll call it spring migration, right? And that seems kind of easy for us to process. But all these butterflies that were essentially overwintering down in Mexico this last winter, they were the ones that migrated through the Midwest in the fall.
Okay.
Right? The butterflies from Nebraska, Kansas, whatever, Minnesota even could make it down there. 3,000-mile journey.
Wow.
Those individuals will make it there. Those adults, they'll live, I'm going to overshoot a little bit. Call it 6 to 9 months, maybe, is what an individual there will live, because they're in that reproductive diapause.
Oh, sure.
Whereas most of the time, our breeding season monarchs are living 4 to 6 weeks. Those other generations, right? So it's the super generation is what people like to call it.
That's quite the difference.
Yeah, huge difference. So anyways, they're overwintering down there. Those same butterflies that made the migration south and overwintered will make the migration north, the immediate migration in March, say, right? Late February, March. Should be March, hopefully. Those adults will lay the eggs on whatever, resources are available for milkweed in northern Mexico and southern Texas, wherever. That egg is the first generation.
Okay.
And so for that season, those eggs will hatch, they'll fly north, recolonize throughout the Midwest, second generation, right? 4 to 6 weeks is any given time is what we're working with. So they got to bridge that gap to get through summer.
Oh, wow.
And then towards the end there, we're talking our August, September butterflies are the migrants that live the longest. So there's 2 more generations in there
So
to make up
those
4.
earlier generations, they're not surviving very long, essentially.
No,
Yeah,
they're totally
that's
just
incredible.
breeding stock.
Well, yeah, because I think it's important that you clarify it, because that's like, I think some people may, and even myself probably, have thought about like, wow, I just think they fly north and it's almost like, waterfowl.
Yeah.
and then they just return back. And it's
Yep.
like, no, it's actually multiple generations of them. That's really cool.
Yeah, and you're like, is that the same butterfly? I see
Yeah,
every
yeah.
day?
Is that the same? No,
Probably
it's not.
Yeah,
no, okay. Well, and it's good. It's good to clarify that, because I think that's a really educational piece. So
Yeah.
So on the spring migration, more than likely we're seeing second generation monarchs then in Nebraska.
Yeah, probably.
And then they'll continue on up to Canada.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Maybe have another generation or 2 more generations, and then that fourth goes all the way, potentially, all the way from Canada all the way back to Mexico.
Yep.
Wow.
I mean, there could be, right, like depending on when they're hatched, how old they are, how far they make it. And if there's still milkweed resources, they could stop if it's a female and lay an egg.
Sure.
But I mean, typically not in that scenario.
So in late summer, fall, there may be eggs being laid, or not?
Yeah,
usually?
there is.
Okay.
Again, there's different environmental cues that they should be keying in on to start that reproductive diapause situation that saves energy, builds up those lipids and things like that. But in a wet year or whatever, and it's relatively mild, maybe like last fall, and it happens every year to an extent, just depends on how many you see. There's always some late hatch that don't make it.
Sure.
Whether it's a caterpillar or an egg or chrysalis that's just lingering for too long and we get too many cold days.
Oh, sure.
Because this year, it seemed like a lot of those numbers came through in like October even. It was stretching into late.
Wow.
And it was kind of non-traditional. We've seen it happen a couple of times, but some pretty big pushes pretty late in the season last year. And, they got to get moving because, I said, they're not going to handle 0-degree temps.
I mean, they must have got pretty lucky, right, to see, and who knows, right, in the grand scheme of things, but to see kind of another little jump in their wintering ground population. I mean, obviously the weather, they hit it perfectly.
It worked out, for one reason or another. Don't know if it was here, down there, or just a combination of things, which is probably the right answer. But, there's always a lot of hypotheses in the spring when they start to recolonize.
Sure.
People think that they can get an estimate of what it's going to be next year based off of what they're seeing now, which is highly variable. And it usually they change their tune by midsummer. It's like, I didn't expect this or account for that. So it can change pretty greatly, but it's fun to still keep your finger on it and try to make an educated guess of what it's going to be.
Yeah, that's really cool. I just hadn't known that, and I think it's a really interesting, really fascinating process. And then just and to be successful amongst all those generations, and then to return back. To me, I feel like there's so many things that could go wrong in that process.
It's like 10% survival in the wild.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Wow.
Or lower.
So one question I was going to ask you about with that is, so what are the common predators for monarchs, and kind of like that life cycle process, or some of them just succumbing because they just, old age kind of thing, or is it primarily they're just getting predated, or?
Yeah, some of them do age out, right? The fortunate ones.
Sure.
But there's no shortage of predators for the monarch butterfly, even though they do eat milkweed that's full of cardenolides and toxic, components. There's still a lot of things out there that will eat them. Whether it's birds or other insects, they're heavily parasitized by a variety of things. Tachinid flies, other fly species, paper wasps. Wasps will eat them and prey upon them. They get disease, a parasite, Ophriocistis electroscira. OE is what we like to call it.
Okay.
But a lot of times, that's transmitted, and it's not always immediately lethal when they're infected with that, but it can cause them to be deformed and have other sublethal effects, which then, again, if it propagates and spreads, can be an issue. And there's a whole nother conversation we can talk about with introduced milkweed species and other things and why that can be problematic.
That's interesting.
And I mean, you could bring rearing into this. Again, pretty highly debated topics.
Sure.
Yeah, it can get pretty interesting.
That's one of the things I love about the podcast, because we have these kind of soil, water, wildlife themes, but then you get into a topic and you're like, well, I could have like 10 different episodes on.
Oh yeah, we could talk about these like.
There's so many different things you could really dive into, but it also really just shows how complex the world is and just the things that we're working in, and that goes back to the it depends kind of response, because it's just is so many different things. And one of the things I always like to tell people is, like, especially when we're working in the habitat management realm, it's like you have like one of these, like, say 5,000 piece puzzle sets. You had all these really tiny puzzle pieces out there, and you're like trying to connect them, and you're like, how does this work? And you don't have the box to show you exactly what that picture is going to look like. I don't even know what I'm building,
but I'm building it. Putting the wheels on as we're going.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I mean, and when we were down in Mexico, it was cool because we actually, I say it's cool, but it's bad for the monarch. When we were down there, we got to see a very natural interaction with some of those predators. There's a couple of birds down there that prey upon those overwintering colonies, and they're beautiful, right? So they've got the black-headed grosbeak and the black-backed oriole. And we were fortunate to actually see both of them. The oriole was on the first afternoon when we went to El Rosario on the hike down, so it wasn't really any monarch interaction there, but we did get to see an adult male, which was cool. They're really pretty. And then the second day when we went to Sierra Chinqua, which is another one of the overwintering colonies, beautiful, beautiful place. Little smaller overwintering numbers there, but it looked like there was more that day just because we were maybe a little bit closer, and it was really cool. But we got to see those black-headed grosbeaks, and they pretty much like just munched that caterpillar or that butterfly. Really? And you'll see, I mean, the wings detach. They don't eat the wings. They mostly just eat the main body part. So we were looking forever, and I was like, all right, we've seen the monarchs, which, this is what I came here to do, but I do want to see the birds. And I was just watching, and I kept seeing like a wing like fall like a leaf, and another wing. And I'm like, I know he's up there, right? Wow. And finally it moved, and I'm like, there he is. And you just watch him. Like, he just dive right into like left and right picking these monarchs, because it's just groups of them. Sure. Like, target-rich environment. But it was really cool to still see them and see, that natural process. And that's a conversation that we have even in a garden setting. People are really invested into pulling these, caterpillars off and making them survive to adults. And they want to rear them or protect them or whatever. And that's fine, especially from an educational component. We all remember that, right? Oh, yeah. Yeah, remember that. No, the old bug box. Yeah. Yep. Everybody remembers it. That's important. That's highly important for us as we move on as conservationists and the general public who do not. They're going to remember that core memory. Yeah.
As a small child, I thought I was a real conservationist, filling my bug box full of anything I could find. Little did I know that I was not doing any help.
Well, yeah, and so, but that's how you learn too, is seeing those things, and also they're like, well, I'm going to protect them from these predators. It's like, well, they're part of the natural ecosystem as well, believe it or not. Yeah, sometimes maybe they're getting catered to better than the other, but again, it depends. It's complex, and you kind of gotta, take each situation case by case. Yeah.
So, as you alluded to, I mean, the monarch butterfly, I mean, it's just a sitting duck, a sitting butterfly in the wintering grounds. Oh, yeah. Is there ever conversation around trying to control some of those bird species, or do they just let it play out?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I mean, not that I'm aware of. I mean, they're, like I said, they're pretty cool birds, but I don't think that their populations are anywhere at a level that they would be concerned about them completely decimating. But that's a good question. I don't necessarily know if they've ever discussed that. I'm sure someone's mentioned it, but I don't think they have any.
Yeah, because like you said, I mean, they would just be eating their fill, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, that's impressive.
So you mentioned these. So are these trips, kind of just going back and wrapping up the trip conversation, are trips still available to the public if somebody was interested? And then how do they, if not, how do they get involved to get into a trip?
Yep. So we work with a Natural Habitat Adventures is the guide service that we kind of have partnered with for the last few years down there. And we run a trip every year, maybe two. This year we're doing 2 trips for 2026, 2027 season. One in February, which I'm pretty sure is full. at this time, and then another one in March, I believe. And I think there might be some openings left in March, but I'm not sure. I'd have to double check as far as this point. But like I said, we do offer them year to year. So check out Monarch Joint Venture's website, or sign up for our newsletter, because we'll definitely post about when the application for those spots can happen. But there's other opportunities out there too, if it's just you're dying to go now that you've heard about it, because it's as cool as it gets, bringing everything full circle, at least, from the line of work that I do, at least. And the folks that went on the trip that we went with, I was one of kind of our hosts, just having the background knowledge of the Monarch, of course. But the people we went with, were amazing too. They came from a variety of different backgrounds, super involved, well-intentioned, the things that they do, and we learned from each other a little bit too. But it's just a really good opportunity to connect with people and see, other folks throughout the country that are trying to help.
Yeah, and I mean, I'd say it's always kind of been on my bucket list, but I mean, definitely not up towards the top. Yeah. But I mean, after talking with you and just your experience, I mean, it's definitely moved up the list for me. So I hope other folks listening to this, I mean, hopefully they get excited and look into the trip as well, because I think it would be amazing for sure.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of cultural aspects, like I said, a lot of history there. Sure. Very fascinating if you're into that alone. And then the food, right? Like you get to try a ton of different foods, and it's very authentic. It's just awesome experience all the way around.
So just a quick question, how long did you go? Like what's the trip length normally?
I went down there, I think I left on like a Tuesday morning out of Omaha, connecting flight in Houston, and then went into Mexico City.
Okay.
And I was there by that night. Okay. And then I came home on Sunday. So there's like 2 travel days. Sure. And then the rest of the days we were kind of bouncing around, looking at Monarchs and doing some other things.
That's cool. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Sounds like a really fun trip. I'll definitely have to do that.
It really.
Fun to probably take even kids along just so they get to see that, and just the experience of that. I think it's kind of one of the, great wonders of the world per se, of you getting to see like all, I just can't imagine like seeing all of them on these trees. Like when you're talking about the weight of them on the branch, that just
the pictures
impressive.
And videos just do no justice,
really?
Which, they rarely ever do. But
yeah, sure.
I mean, like it's, this is going to come at a stake to my manlyhood maybe, but I was like, man, it brings a tear to your eye. I was wearing sunglasses, thankfully, because I was just like, this is crazy, man. It's just
cool.
Crazy.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's got to be just awe-inspiring. Just standing there like, holy smokes.
Yeah, you listen, right? Like you don't usually get to hear butterfly wings.
Yeah.
And you hear that, and it's just like peaceful. Like there's other people, but, it's important to be quiet.
Sure.
And respectful of everyone there. So, I mean, there's a lot of people taking pictures, a lot of people videoing and doing things, which is good, but, you still want to be respectful to, the people the locals there and the butterflies.
So if you're too loud, will that scare them? Will it cause them to move?
I mean, it kind of can elicit a response there, it seems to anyways. But yeah, it's just, I think it's more for the other folks' experience trying to,
sure,
kind of the peace, the serenity of all of it, and trying to just soak that all in and be present in the moment. Because it's like, yeah, you want to take pictures and take videos but you're also like, slow down. Let me just experience this for a second. And
yeah, let me hear a butterfly wing beat.
Oh yeah. You can hear it in the videos too. It's crazy, but it doesn't do it any justice.
Very neat.
That's really cool.
I appreciate you sharing that experience with
us.
us.
Oh, yeah. I'm happy to share anybody that asks. But, and I mean, I was very lucky to be a representative of Monarch Joint Venture to let me go on that trip this year. So, I mean, it probably would have been, a couple more years before I would have been able to do it and justify it too. So, pretty thankful for that opportunity.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that's cool is like you just kind of alluded to this is like you get the opportunity to slow down and how often in life we're just go. And it's an opportunity to I can't imagine like how peaceful that would be.
Oh, man.
And just to be able to be there and be like, okay, I don't have to be like doing 50 different things. I can just kind of enjoy the experience of that.
Right.
So,
yeah, like I said, it kind of brought it full circle. And it's like, it makes your work feel worthwhile, right? When you get to see all ends. Because we've talked about, I mean, I know the life cycle. I know where they go. But, it gives you a little bit more credibility too when you come
sure.
back here, right, for the job that I'm doing. And I mean, from that aspect alone has been very helpful.
That's cool.
Kind of circling back to maybe that science pillar that you brought up, the science pillar of the Monarch Joint Venture. What is some of the current research that's going on today around the species? You mentioned the Bluetooth tags,
Yeah.
but is there a specific question you're trying to answer? Or?
Oh man, there's a lot. I mean, we're doing a lot of different stuff out there across the country, different universities, different agencies, whatever, different nonprofits. We're doing a subset of some of our own work, but we're, still trying to keep in tune and still basically publicize the stuff that comes out, which is why we develop our annual research review. Will come out each year, and anything that has to do with everything Monarch related is going to be in that research review. And we've been doing that for a couple of years now. We've got like 4 or 5 different research reviews. And so, before that too, it was backdated to a lot of research that was not maybe as recent. We try to keep it, current, and feed off. So if there's any research you're looking for, it's probably in that review. And there's a ton of fascinating stuff in there.
That's really cool. I'll have to check that out because I think that's one of the things we've really spent a lot of time in our lab is taking and getting that science out to the public and how important that science is. And I think like when we saw with COVID is a good illustration, like that scientific process unfolding and we're constantly learning new things. And then like you're kind of alluding to, like there's more and more questions that you guys are finding.
Oh,
and it's
man.
like, hey, as
Every
technology advances, now we can take and address questions of like movement that we couldn't have done, even just like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And so it's constantly, figuring out like how do we better kind of, create essentially a better product in a sense of like in the habitat management realm of like how do we constantly keep refining it based on the resources that we're seeing that these monarchs are needing and other wildlife are needing, and how do we continue to shape that through these changing landscapes that are so diverse and are constantly changing through time. Because I think that's one thing that I always go back to is like landscape change. A lot of times we just don't see the changes that are happening because we drive down that same piece of road all the time, and say, oh, it looks like the same things happen there. It's been happening there for years. But in reality, as we all know, succession is taking place and those plant communities are changing.
Yep.
And if there's no disturbance, that we eventually would lead to some type of forested community from a grassland community over time. And I think it's important to continue to educate people as well in that process and sharing out what that research is showing and then what all this can really mean to them as a manager on the land.
Yep.
So that's awesome to hear you guys are doing that.
Yeah, I mean, it's our science team does a fantastic job, and I get pulled in here and there. I just try to help wherever I can, but I mean, they're fantastic, and we've done a lot of cool stuff, and I've learned a lot with the research reviews. We should be coming out with our most recent one here very soon, but I'll get you guys links to those as well. But yeah, I mean, some of the stuff we've been doing, we've been doing a lot of drone work too.
Really?
So we have kind of a platform that we've created where we can go through actually and identify common milkweed stems to get an abundance density of stems per acre or in a field or whatever. And so we've been flying these all over the country actually for the last few years. And we've got a new model. We're kind of training a floral model to kind of separate different, bare ground, water, flowering species at that time, grasses, whatever, trees. So kind of leaning into that tech a little bit. But yeah, there's a lot of other research components that our monitoring is being used to create, of course, through like our IMMP, Integrated Monarch Monitoring Program. That's being used for a lot of different things to support that, where the monitoring is being done in each state or a subset of states.
Speaking of the monitoring component of that, obviously, which is extremely important, right?
Yeah.
You need to be able to monitor to see if your changes or that habitat is making a difference for said species, no matter what it is.
Yep.
Is there a way that the public can get involved with any sort of your monitoring efforts?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned it too, because I mean, that's one way, besides someone might feel like I can't do much, I don't have any ground, and, I don't have the time to have potted plants or whatever, can't do much habitat-wise, but they still can, right? They can participate in volunteer opportunities, participate in different community science things, whether it's tagging or testing for OE, as I mentioned. There's a variety of different things that these folks can do to play a part. So I think
Where would they go to learn more about those opportunities?
Yeah, so on our website, we actually have a handout broke down of which one might be best fit for you based on your accommodations. So we can share a link to that too.
That's cool. Well, next time you guys are tagging, I'd love to see that. I'd love to visit and see if that's possible. I think it'd be kind of cool experiences to get to see how you do that.
Yeah, and it's been cool because I mean I've been tagging butterflies well before I worked with Monarch Joint Venture and doing butterfly work really for over a decade now, right? And so every year we have a tagging event at Lake Wanahoo there. We continue to do that.
Sure.
Pheasants Forever's always hosted that. We've co-hosted it as of most recently, so we totally plan to still do that in September. Usually about that second week of September is kind of like our peak, give or take. Every year is a little different, but we'll have that. We're going to have other tagging opportunities. I know Game and Parks, some other folks do some locally, but like I mentioned, the blue morpho tags, those CTT tags, I think we're going to be doing at least 50 of those tags this fall.
Oh, cool.
Is that event open to the public, or is that more private just because the cost associated with it? And
so, I mean, it's going to be public facing for sure. And we're going to work with the zoo on some of that, the Omaha Henry Dorley Zoo there. They're funding a lot of that. And then we're going to take some of those up to Ponca State Park for the outdoor expo. And then we might be able to have some flexibility. I got to chat with them, of course, get their blessing to have, one here, one there, just as a training opportunity for these people to see what's happening and how it's done.
Yeah.
It's pretty wild to see for the first time.
Well, I'm just thinking about putting transmitters on like a pronghorn, so it's, and thinking, wow, a butterfly, like how do you
you grab it the wrong way. It's not going to be making the migration.
It's crazy.
I think it'd be just cool for experience to see, and especially kids too. Like I think it'd be cool just to get them to see it. Like I know, just think you guys were talking about the science experiments earlier. So my kids, my one daughter's in 3rd grade now, and they were doing the chicken experiment where they had put the eggs in the head under the light and hatch them out. And so that's just so cool because she would keep coming home every day and talking about it. She's like, hey, 3 more hatched out. And so just being able to see that excitement at that age, and then, of course, continue to build on that, is really key from an educational standpoint, an engagement standpoint to, continue to conserve species like monarchs. So.
It is huge.
And when your daughter comes home and asks if she can bring one of those chickens home, you better say yes.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. She did. Well, believe me, she did. She wanted to bring it home. And although we live in a development right now, so my wife, and we have 2 beagle puppies. So I kind of were like, well, maybe we better not do that.
One turns into 10.
We just need to, and then we just need
chicken
to,
math.
That's where we would like to get outside of Lincoln. Have a little farm we could do that, though.
There you go. That'd be the dream, right?
Yep, absolutely.
So we glossed over just some habitat management, and that's a large portion of your job is working with landowners, helping them implement habitat, whether it's on that 1/4 acre scale or just a smaller plot, even up to 50, 60 acres. So I want to just touch on that a little bit for some of our growers. If a person has maybe let's start in town. If they don't have any ground where they can plant something, you mentioned pots. Growing milkweeds in a pot, I mean, that's going to benefit monarchs.
Yeah, I mean, there's certain species that are more acclimated to doing that, but yeah, the milkweeds and then some of the floral resources, if they've got a garden space or even a raised bed or whatever they can put it in, that would be better. But, there's still an opportunity in a pot. But yeah, I mean, like I said, whatever space that they're willing to offer, something can be done there. Preferably, we have a few more options when it's full sun. But, even if it is shaded, there's still opportunities for plant species that you can pick to fit that type of habitat, essentially.
Will pollinators use non-native species?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they're not, I mean, generalists will, right? So there's generalists and then there's specialists, depending on, like a honeybee is pretty generalist versus maybe like a tiny little native bee that's like, nope, just this flower or whatever. But a monarch is a generalist. So in that aspect, we do definitely try to cater our habitat designs more towards the native side of things. Depending on the landowner's objectives or the site's objectives, we may have to pivot a little bit. For example, like a solar scenario, plant height considerations. We're very limited what we can provide, and especially something that's going to survive in that type of a habitat.
Yeah.
Or maybe, there's a height restriction in town or whatever. So we got to get a little bit creative, and a lot of our partners, and we'll say we try not to make perfect the enemy of good in our work, because they are still a generalist. They definitely will use it if it's blooming when they're around.
Yeah, I didn't even think of solar fields as a place for monarch habitat. But that's probably the outside of the box thinking that we need to be able to operate in today's world.
Yeah, we work with them. We really do. We partner with the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund, Solar Synergy Program there. They've been doing a lot of work there. I know Conservation Blueprint, another local Nebraska entity, does a lot of solar work. So they're pretty well versed in that space.
So here specifically in the Midwest, what kind of window should landowners be shooting for to have floral resources and just habitat available?
Yeah. So the entire growing season? No. No, a little bit more specific than that is, they should show up here probably like mid-April, pending conditions are right, maybe closer to the end. And so we've got to have milkweed available when they get here, right? Something to lay the females to lay eggs on. If you can get some of those early bloomers, that's great too, because they still need that fuel in order to, provide their flight and bouncing around. Other than that, having multiple things flowering throughout the growing season is fantastic. Having those milkweed resources available for when they're using it. But it's extremely pivotal to have those nectar resources in the fall when they're coming through in that mass, bigger numbers, bigger groups. That's when we're going to see those roosts, even locally. So having those late blooming species, liatris species are fantastic. One that is a common favorite of our audience is the meadow blazing star, which is Liatris ligustylus. But there's a bunch of different liatris species to choose from depending on where you're located. But, native thistles, holy smokes, powerhouse when it comes to monarchs and bumblebees and a variety of other things. So if you can tolerate them and you're aware it's a native thistle, awesome late bloomer. Your goldenrods, your asters, sunflowers, all those things, super important.
How do folks tell if the thistle in their field is native or not?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so we get that one. Well, I get that one a lot, not we. But, and I know you guys do too on a lot of the habitat work that the farm bill biologists are doing. But a lot of times, one pretty good indicator is it's bloom time, right? It's quite a bit later than what you've already seen your Canada thistle or your musk thistle or some of the other noxious species, at least here, blooming. So it'll be towards the fall. And it looks a little bit different. If you've seen a lot of them, you can almost tell right away. They're pretty solitary for the most part. And then if you look at the leaf as well, usually it's a little less aggressive looking with spine as far as the spines go versus the noxious or invasive. But if you pick up the underside of that leaf, it's usually lighter or silver in color, lighter than the top side of that leaf. And that's one way to tell.
Which I think is extremely important.
It is.
For growers.
Just indiscriminately chopping thistles, which, I get.
Yep.
Sure.
So at the end of the day, what type of producer are you looking to work with?
Yeah. So, it goes back to, it depends. But, we really want to open the door to say yes to anyone. For my work specifically, especially leveraged based on, the grant funding, the money that we've gotten to support positions like myself, we do like to work a lot with private working landowners, so farmers and ranchers where it makes sense. Still leveraging a lot of the existing programs, not trying to necessarily recreate the wheel, but fill niches and gaps where we have to, especially with that size conversation. Because, that size has created an obstacle for eligibility in certain scenarios. And that's, we're trying to address that more and more.
Well, and I want to commend you too. You mentioned working lands. I mean, I know obviously there's something to be said for perennial habitat, but you and I have had numerous conversations about we can do good habitat work on row crop acres depending on the practice. So I just commend you in opening the door to work with producers on those acres and not just turning them away.
Yeah, it's a challenge, right? I mean, it's an obvious landscape because it's pretty large. But, it's a challenging landscape too. We've got a lot of different objectives that we're trying to meet.
Yep.
But there's in that there's a lot of opportunity. There really is if you look for it and you really kind of, again, get creative. So, and they're great. A lot of times those landowners have, the same objective. They just need a little bit of help along the way to know the details. So.
Well, I think that's too is really to kind of, as we're getting towards the close here, of thinking about as you're engaging with those landowners, everybody's going to have different objectives most likely, but at the end of the day, it's building those relationships, finding out what people really need. And, one of the things I've seen from even some of our survey data, producers do want to diversify their operation. It's mainly the markets and the economics that are really driving that. And then also, is there training to kind of help them in that diversification? And it's also goes back to, we're not saying you have to diversify and like to a point where you're eliminating, what you're currently doing. It's just could be like 5% of your operation.
Right.
But I've had producers, and I'm sure you guys have as well, that just doing those little small things have had such tremendous impacts for their operation. And, it's that they're able to then tell that story to their neighbors and show like this little incremental change that I made really helped capitalize on some of these things that I was having some issues on and really helped me solve some of these problems that I had.
Oh, yeah.
And so the more they can be able to share that to their neighbors, I think it will continue to build that out. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it comes at a risk, right, for them to try new things. And so even when they try something new, even on a small portion, that can turn into something pretty big. I'm sure you guys have had that happen. And it's kind of, the relationship building is all of it. It really is. It's amazing what these projects can snowball into just with the relationships you build over the quality of work that you can truly do. And just, doing good work on the landscape.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. So if producers are interested in reaching out to you and or your team, no matter where they are, where do they go? How do they get a hold of you guys?
Yeah, so they can reach out to the Habitat Help Desk, which I'll send you guys that contact info, that email, habitat@monarchjointventure.org. We've also got a phone number that comes straight to my Google Voice there. They can reach out there if they want to call. So pretty easy to get a hold of. If you reach out to that, you're going to get a hold of me. Because again, even though our team's growing, we're not that big. I try to pride myself on getting a hold of people if they reach out, no matter what, to get that process and conversation started.
Well, with that, do you have any other final points or anything you want to cover before we wrap this up?
Man, I don't know. We covered a lot. I think we could cover even more, but it's pretty cool because you mentioned we talked a little bit about the history of generations, and as time has gone on and being innovative, there's folks that essentially harvest milkweed too for garments, and there's opportunity there and other things. Monarch Flyway is a company in Ogallala actually. They make things. You guys can look it up after this, but so there's an opportunity there. But like World War II, right? Milkweed was pretty important. The kids were out there harvesting milkweed pods and the floss for life jackets. Yeah,
I did not realize that.
Yeah.
That is incredible, yeah.
So, it's super diversified. There's tons and tons of opportunities, things we've even already done that we can still maybe leverage in the future.
Well, and that's the kind of, as we're heading towards the end here, I think that's a really excellent point to end on, is that we're, this innovation, we have a huge opportunity before us. And you mentioned that earlier, like you can look at the challenges and say, well, we can either do nothing or we can do something. And that's basically what you guys are doing, is something.
Exactly.
And so finding ways like, hey, we can also build into stackable enterprises, and we can begin to think about that can turn into business ventures, we have an angler program here at UNL. It's designed agribusiness program, helping, students really build out business ideas. And so opportunity to build that out and think about how can we help the producers, help these local communities, and really revitalize that collective system as we begin to create kind of these stackable enterprises, stackable opportunities, so that we kind of move towards more of this holistic, working land system where we're balancing conservation and production. We have to do all of it. And so how do we do it strategically? And that's where I think there's opportunities to do that, as you're alluding to. So
For sure. Yeah. I mean, and we couldn't do the work without partners, right? And the funding that we get and having that partnership to lean on when, one of us is having a tough time or the other is, it's pivotal for us to be able to continue this work and not lose that momentum too.
Yeah.
And, that's the current challenge, it's reality that a lot of us are facing. So it's interesting times, but we're navigating it.
Yep.
Very well said. Very well said. Interesting times, but we're going to remain positive and push forward like we always do in the conservation realm.
Heck yeah.
Hey, it drives innovation. That's what I would argue.
It definitely does.
Because you got to start thinking outside of the proverbial box the way that things have been done. You got to say, well, all right, how do we get around this?
Yeah,
so
that's exactly right.
Yep.
With that, man, I just want to say thank you. I know you're a very busy guy, so we appreciate you taking the time to come on with us. And honestly, as more research comes out, I mean, let's get back together again and discuss some of it.
Yeah, we definitely need to keep in touch more, but I want to thank you guys for having me. Honestly, it's super fun to come down here and see the old stomping grounds too. I don't get down here as much. I went to college here and got my bachelor's here and spent a lot of time in Hardin Hall. So it's been nice to bring it full circle.
Heck yeah. We appreciate it, man. Thanks.
Thanks
guys.
again. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
Are you enjoying the Wild Ag Podcast? You or your organization can sponsor upcoming episodes that bring important information to listeners just like you. To learn more, visit our website, go.unl.edu/wildag. Wild Ag is part of the Natural Resources University Podcast Network. If you enjoy this podcast, please leave us a review so others can find us and tune in. And we want to hear from you. You can submit questions or topic suggestions to us at wildagpodcast@gmail.com. That's WILDAG podcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.